Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, where patrons of the main podcast get together to talk about books and topics the main crew hasn't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book, and today I have with me Cesky, otherwise known as Josh of the Libromancy podcast.
Hello.
I also have with me Lammy Lambs, otherwise known as Mike from the Cosmere Deep Dive podcast.
Hello, Internet.
Tonight we'll be discussing Zoe's Tale, the fourth book in the Old Man's War series by John Scalzi. Of course, we're going to have spoilers for the first 3 books of Old Man's War, starting right up front. And really, we can't discuss this book at all without mentioning that this is a companion book to The Last Colony. It's basically all that's missing from all the missing narrative from the main story. I have thoughts, but first, let's rank it on a 5-star scale. Mike?
All right. Do you guys remember what I ranked Last Colony? Like 4.5, something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
On its own, this is like 2.5. When read at like right after the Last Colony, 3.5.
Oh, that's more generous than I am. What about you, Josh?
I would give this one a 3.5. I would give this one a 3.5. I liked it a lot more than The Last Colony. But whether that's just because I kind of knew everything that was going to happen and it was just nice to see it from a different point of view or, a different reason, but I did enjoy it. So 3.5.
Oh, wow. So I rate it 4 stars,
Wow.
which surprises me that, yeah, wow. Yeah, no, I thought it was 4 stars. I have some issues with it, but we'll get into that later. So how do you feel about the hard shift to an exclusive one-person narrator? Because the other books switch back and forth between third and first-person narrator, and it's a very aggressively teenage girl voice. I wonder if that's why I liked it better.
I really liked her voice. I really liked being with Zoe and have it being all from her point of view. So I don't think that's why I disliked it. I really liked having it just be that one person that you never have to, you're not jumping back and forth. It's always that one person. You see their change. I liked it. I like that.
Yeah, I've got no issues with the perspective. Like Zoe's a fun character to be in the head of.
So fun.
She is, and I think I so easily identified with her because I remember being a teenage girl. It was many, many, many years ago, but a lot of the things that she's going through, I can totally relate to, and like I said, maybe that's why I like the book more. It has a couple really major flaws. I think that, now I'm gonna talk myself down from my 4 stars. Everything is just a little too convenient. Everything works out just a little too pat. Does that make sense?
I think I get you. Yeah.
If I didn't have The Last Colony before this, I might think that, but seeing it from both sides it didn't bother me that much.
The whole end of the book was just a little too pat for me. So, anyway, anything else before spoilers? Oh,
Not for me.
okay. So, I am doing this off the cuff, so it's going to be extra specially fun. And so, this is the last colony told from Zoe's perspective. They land on the planet. She gets a boyfriend. The Oban start training her in physical and self-defense. And because she finds out that there's been 6 attempts of assassinating her and she didn't know about it. And then we have the whole communication thing where the Oban don't tell people what they know because they can't for reasons. And she breaks up with her boyfriend, and then they get back together. He writes her a poem and then is killed in a missile attack. And then she's asked to go warn the general of what's his name again? The
General Gao.
General Gao.
General Gao, that he's going to be
You clearly
assassinated.
have never played Final Fantasy VI.
I don't play video games very often. And that's one of the places where your podcast always loses me. When you start talking about video games, I'm like, oh no. Anyway. So General Gao, she has to go warn him that he's going to be assassinated. And then she uses her power over the Oban to get them to go get a Kanju. That's what they're called, right? Kansu.
Not a
And
kaiju.
whatever. Kansu. And a whole bunch of people died. She has guilt, and then there's a battle, and then everything comes together, and she gets the magic thing to go back to and save her planet. So that's the book. Oh, and then they have to evacuate, and they're going to go live with General Gao now, at least for a while.
Well, they think about it.
Well, we know what happens because it
Yeah.
happened at the end
they
of the
leave the
Last
planet.
Colony.
No. The end of The Last Colony happens after the end of this book. Do you remember what happened in the end of The Last Colony, Red?
No, I've read like 5 books and done 2 podcasts since then. So
So
no.
remember how they go to Earth and bring the CDF to Earth?
Oh, that's right. Yes. I do
Yeah.
remember
So
that.
No,
so in between,
Not the
yeah.
CDF, the
Well,
Conclave.
no, yeah, the Conclave to Earth, not the CDF. So that's in between. They live with General Gao for a bit, then they all go to Earth after that.
Though they do technically kidnap General Rybicki and take him to Earth with him. So, you know what? Yeah, they did bring the CDF to Earth.
Yeah. So, because I have failed in my due diligence as a podcast host, having
Failure.
only
Yeah.
read this book once, I am turning the hosting chair over to Lammy.
All right. So, I guess I'll just go through the questions I had in the order I had them. So, let's get this out of the way. Red, this is primarily toward you, but Chesky, feel free to jump in. Where'd you cry in this book? Because you did. We know you did.
I
I did.
'Cause I
I did.
cry. Yeah, yeah. So, I cried at work while I was listening to it this morning, at the funeral, obviously, and the part where she reads the poem that the last thing her boyfriend wrote to her, about how I belong to you and like a heart and like a hope and like a kiss, and I hope that you belong to me that way too. And it's very nearly a proposal of marriage. And then at the very end, when she's saying goodbye to the world to Roanoke, and she's like thinking of leaving all of her friends, and she's like kisses the window and closes the shade. So anyway,
All right,
yeah.
Chesky.
I did not cry at that part. I didn't even blink an eye at the funeral. Like I knew it was sad, but didn't didn't touch me. Mainly probably because I didn't read that poem very diligently. But that's just not me. No, I
Oh,
cried.
it's a poem. It's like lyrics in a Tolkien book. You just skate right past it.
That's right. You start, you see where it starts, and you see where it ends, and you skip it. No, I breezed it and I kind of read it, but it doesn't have as big of an impact on me. No, the part I cried about was when the consul was talking to her, and he's like, "Hey, you know, I finally got all the people here, the convicts, to kill the Oban. But if you just tell all your Oban to commit suicide right now, I'll just give you what you want, no questions asked." And then she thinks about it and she's like, I don't want to. And then she goes and like talks to every single Oban that's going to fight for her and gives them a hug and tells them that she's proud of them. And they all like say their thing back to her, like, it's an honor for me to fight for you. And like, this is so cool. And then I don't remember the line exactly, but it's like, so then, they went and had their fight and it wasn't even close. It's just
Yeah.
like that chivalry goodness of like, and so they won that way, and I like that. And I cried. That's why I cried there. I was like, "Why am I crying? This isn't like it's sad, but it's not even like sad. It's more like endearing sad and like proud sad. Like so."
I didn't
Yeah.
actually cry, but I did get choked up a little bit.
Oh, I cried. I cried. My wife came and dropped me off cold medicine afterwards, and she's like, "Do you look like you've been crying?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was a really touching part of the book. Like, just don't ask about it."
It is so good. It is a very good part of the book.
Uh, Mine were
Lammy?
the funeral, the poem funeral, and also Chesky's bit where she gives like the big impassioned speech to the Open.
Huh.
Those were my 2 points. Not leaving Roanoke. That one didn't get me.
Yeah.
No, that one got me. I mean, she's saying goodbye to her friends. She's finally got a new home, and it's being taken away yet again. And how many times does that happen in her life? We have
Well,
the
that
station.
that actually brings up something that I didn't write about, but I did want to talk about, which is, did Zoe actually have any friends on Huckleberry?
We don't see them, but we don't see her perspective from Huckleberry.
Yeah, it starts when they're like on the ship to Roanoke.
Well, that's okay. This was like my one little nitpick with the book is that sometimes it moved back and forward in time near the beginning. After the
Yeah.
beginning, like half of the book or third of the book, it was very straightforward. But the beginning half is like they're on the Magellan and they know they're all lost. And then it goes back to when they're on Huckleberry and General the general comes and visits them and she sees him standing out in the field talking, and then goes back to the Magellan, and then goes back to Huckleberry, and then so it was just I didn't enjoy that as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you guys
Yeah.
remember that? Yeah. But then after it was like continuous, that was great. I loved it. So it's like very small nitpick on that.
Well, I only bring this up because like her relationships with the people on Huckleberry are not Huckleberry, Roanoke are like the core of the story, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
But as far as I can tell, like she had no relationships worth mentioning from Huckleberry, and it seems weird that she'd go from from the one extreme end to the other.
It's
I
true because
I
she's not like messaging her friends like from Huckleberry when she's on the Magellan before they skip or anything like that. But I don't know. Sometimes a clean break is what's required.
I just I feel like we didn't get enough of her on Huckleberry to really know the answer to that question. That's what I would say.
Okay. So I'm gonna skip that one because I want to get back to it later. Chesky, does
Hmm.
you in our last recording you had some issues with the last colony where there were like multiple plot points that just sort of stopped and the book was like, we're not going to tell you how, but this got resolved, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Did this work, or did this book that contains all of those resolutions, all of those like deeper explanations, did that work better for you either on its own or like read in combination with the last colony?
I think if you were to read it in combination, it would work really well together. But I also think it worked very well on its end. It was really nice to see how Zoe convinced General Gao, like that the assassin was coming beyond just, hey, I went and told him and he believed me and we stopped the assassin and now we're here. You know what I mean?
And I
So I
brought a
liked,
magic box.
yeah, and I brought a magic box that I just happened to get. And it's like, okay, now we know how she got the energy sapper, basically. And I like seeing that. So I did like that part, seeing how they dealt with the how she dealt with the werewolves in quotations there. That was interesting because they just kind of drop off as well. And so it's nice to see some kind of a thing. I don't know exactly how believable that werewolf scene was versus the other one we'd seen, but yeah, didn't bother me.
And dodgeball. Dodgeball got expanded greatly
Yeah, dodgeball got expanded greatly, but
I could
dodgeball is life.
it is. We've already established that.
with Zoe making a supercut of all the times that Enzo got just absolutely demolished directly in the face by the dodgeball.
That was such a fun, like, just scenes to have her to read about her doing that because it's like that is something that people who do generally like who do really like each other, something they would do. Like, look, I could about all the spots where you were getting embarrassed and like beaten up, but like I made it for you, and it's just that felt realistic to me. So
And
I
her
loved it.
watching it like right after the funeral is very believable. But I think I would have preferred 2 books, but split instead of having one just from Zoe's perspective and one from John and Jane's perspective, kinda having those plot lines told together in 2 books. That's what I would have preferred, I think.
So like cut it off at werewolves. Like
Yeah,
werewolves be the end of book one, and then
Like, yeah,
yeah,
so
surviving
deal.
Roanoke and then
Yeah,
dealing with the conclave in a second book.
yeah,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
makes sense to me. So then yes, that leads to my next question of, do you guys believe
Wait,
the
wait, wait.
author's note? Nope, you got more. Okay,
I got more about werewolves.
yeah, tell
I
me
I
about
agree.
werewolves.
I agree with Chesky. I don't quite buy the resolution, but I like the fact that she got to kick the crap out of Gretchen's
Magdy.
boyfriend. Yeah, that was so good. And I just love that. And I like the exchange of gifts where she gives her pendant to her she calls him her her werewolf. And then he gives her the stone knife. I like that part too. But the fact that she never gets around to telling her parents about it, I don't
But she does
I
have Hickory tell her parents.
I kn no.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
she has
'Cau
Gretchen
no, because
tell
Jane
Oh, she
doesn't
has
know about it
Gretchen
when she's
tell him. She
yeah,
has Gretchen tell, sorry,
but
excuse
that's,
me.
like, what, weeks afterwards or
Yeah,
whatever? So
but,
eh.
that part didn't bother me so much because if you had told her parents about it, then you'd be wondering, "Well, why didn't I see that from John's perspective
Right,
in the
which is
first book that I'd already read?" So he couldn't just be like, "And then she told me that she did this because she didn't do it in the first
which
book."
is why I would prefer to see the narrative the way I described.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Okay. So then, do you guys believe the author's note at the end that the last colony was completely written and published, and then later, separately, he got the idea to write Zoe's tale?
No.
Or are you guys on Team Lammy of, no, John Scalzi is lying to us. He very definitely at bare minimum outlined this as one book with two perspectives.
Yeah, I'm
That
on Team
then,
Lammy for sure,
yeah,
because the it when you see the way the plots fit together, it doesn't make sense, especially
Yeah.
with yeah, it just doesn't. In the first book, you just like Chesky was complaining about, you just have these weird drop-offs. Like, what happens to the werewolves? I think we all mentioned that too in our last episode.
I agree. I think I'm on Team Lammy here too, that it had to have been, written as one book and then kind of split into two. But
I
like
mean,
splitting perspective wise, right?
if you're looking for it, I think you can like spot where stuff got expanded to like fill space
Hmm.
to get both books to like the length they were supposed to be. But yeah, in the last colony, you can definitely see like, oh yeah, there were supposed to be scenes here explaining other stuff that happened. Yeah,
Hmm.
So, why do you think that it was released this way? It seems weird to me. Was it a timeline issue maybe?
I would actually guess it's like a length of book issue. John Scalzi writes books that are this long. Like he hits a very consistent page count.
Hmm.
And then this one would have been approximately double that with, two plots going on and two characters to follow. So I'm guessing just like fairly early in the process, somebody was like, well, why don't we just split this up into two books?
But why the
Yeah.
way they did it? That's
Well,
the thing
probably
that
because most people are used to following John and Jane throughout, or John at least through the first three, and then to go to Zoe for the fourth one would be my thought. It's John, 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 and then
mm, I don't know. I just think it was a
Well,
weird choice.
John, Jane, John.
yeah, John, Jane, John.
Yeah. Oh, like I said, I just think it's a weird choice and I don't understand it. So that's my
All right.
Yeah.
thought.
Next up, Red. This was mostly for you. You had some issues previously with a lack of Kansu. So are you better? Are you good?
No, no, I think it wasn't it Chesky? I mean, yeah, I'm glad to have him back. Um, Man, that was a really, really creepy encounter. Um, uh, so the Khonsu is like, "Well, you can just make them do that thing that you because they're beholden to you." And it just shows you how above it all they are. Like, they think nothing of her telling the Oban to commit suicide.
I
Um,
mean,
I
they
thought it
they
was
made half the Oban kill themselves the last time they had a
yeah,
chat. So
that was actually a problem I did have with that plot point, but I'll let, Chesky say something first
Oh, I
before I
was gonna
say something.
say I liked seeing the open, the Kansu, excuse me. We see a lot of the open, but I liked seeing the Kansu. I thought we learned kind of a lot about them. That the
Mhm,
reason they never gave consciousness to the open is because they're trying to get rid of their own consciousness. Basically, they're trying to like be that like a monk that just is like so in tune with nature and with the world and with life and the universe. But you really see just like every Kansu is like super bloodthirsty. Like they have all the power, but the only thing that ever satisfies them is death. Not, if you had all power, which they do basically in this situation, right?
mhm,
You, you might want something besides death to satisfy you, but that's not what they like. They only care about death. So,
and it's weird that they, are so concerned with losing consciousness and so obsessed with bossing people around. It just seems like or it feels that way anyway.
not obsessed with like losing consciousness, but that's their end goal is to be less not conscious because conscious is not the right word, but to be more in tune is kind of how I felt it. And that's why they made the open. The open were perfect or near perfect in their eyes, but
I mean, in the state that the galaxy was in pre-conclave, the Oban were doing extraordinarily well. Like they weren't
yeah,
overreaching. They they had a reputation that kept every other race from bothering them ever.
Yep.
And yeah, no, like the Oban were doing just fine.
Yeah. So now I said I wanted to go back to a thought, and now I can't remember what that thought was. Oh, yeah. So what I didn't buy is that she's like, "Oh my gosh, all these people died to talk to the consul." I'm like, they basically tell you that before you even go send them. So her being all shocked and surprised, I was like, "Girl, Doc
think
told
she
you."
was I think she was more surprised with how many had to die for it versus just that they were going to die.
But she knew the history. She knew that the last time that they talked to the consul, they lost like half their population or something like that. In fact,
But
I was
she's a
surprised. I mean,
teenage girl. So she would forget that kind of a thing. Like that wouldn't have as much of an
But
impact
it
until
comes up in
it's
her conversation with Doc before she d
Yeah, in her whole like I demand that you do this for me thing, like it sounds like she's very on board with like you do whatever it takes and I understand that whatever it takes will mean that some of you will die.
Mhm.
And
but
then
it's
yeah.
it's different than saying like it's just telling people like I require this, I demand that you go do this, and knowing that they could die, and then hearing and learning that that people did die because of something you said. Yeah, I think as a teenager, she probably knew that they were going to die, but didn't like know it in her heart, you know? And then when she's confronted with the fact, like, I killed thousands of Oban because of my decision to get the
Well,
Konsu,
she
like,
and the Kansu killed those Oban. It's about a 50-50
yeah,
blame split.
it's definitely not just on her because the Konsu are the one who just love death, right? But she did send them, and they were going to do it anyway, so that's why it was prepared. But
Yeah,
like,
and see, and that's one of those things, it's like, it's just a little too pat, just a little too pat. We were already gonna do this, we already had this plan.
well, they just sped up the
The
timeline, it says, but yeah.
the Khonsu happened to show up to stop a war, like, just by showing up. She just happens to I don't know. There's just so many little things like that at the end that it started to annoy me.
I having to work in with the other book, it made sense that some things had to just be finished and done and get worked on, so
Eh.
All right. I'm actually out of pre-written questions, so off the cuff. Red. At one point in time, you were a teenage girl.
I was.
Rate the conversation, like rate the dialogue between Gretchen and Zoe on accuracy, please.
They didn't get enough arguments. That is my main they were
In
just
in fairness, they had annoying boys to argue with first.
girls get in a lot more arguments than that, and they have a lot more falling outs. They just do. We are catty and backstabby and mean, to each other. We're actually meaner to each other than we are to boys, generally
Eve.
speaking. And I think I talked about this on another podcast, like, we will fight with each other, but we there is truly um, that "this is mine" sort of thing. So, like, you're fighting with your friends, and then someone else comes at them, and then you immediately make up.
Mhm.
But other than that, I think it was pretty accurate. That was the only thing that I thought was inaccurate, and I wonder how old John's daughter was when he wrote this book.
9, it says in the author's
Really?
note at the end.
That
Yeah.
surprises me. I would expect her to have been a teenager when he wrote this book because there's a lot of stuff that is very accurately teenage girl. But the
I
relationship
mean,
between it's a little too perfect.
she is now, like
She's in college now.
time has passed. She has gotten older, yes.
So
Mhm.
I don't know. What'd you guys think? What'd you guys think about the relationship between the two boys?
That was pretty believable. I mean, you sometimes there's a smart one and there's a dumb one, and you go along with them, but
Yeah, I've met these guys.
I
Like
have
not
too, actually.
necessarily in a like poetry versus stealing your dad's gun like a moron, but yeah, I've met these guys.
I love that he almost shot off his own foot. What a dumbass.
he was just so dumb the whole time. I could
I
not.
mean, I will say that there's a reason why 51% of babies born are boys, and by the time you reach 18, 51% of 18-year-olds are girls because boys do dumb things and get themselves killed. Anyway, yeah, I know he doesn't wanna be a snitch, but why would he even go along with this, going out in the woods with rifles? That did not make sense to me, really.
Well, he wanted to go
Um
out there to protect him, to try and stop him from himself. If he can't stop him from going out on his own, it's better to have somebody there with him for when he gets into trouble to help him out. But
yeah, that's sort of Enzo's whole thing with Magdi is can't talk him out of doing the dumb thing, but can be there with him to stop the consequences of the dumb thing sometimes.
I was gonna say, could he really have stopped him? I mean, the dude's lucky he didn't shoot himself in the foot. He's and here's the other thing, you just don't pick up a firearm. You have to learn how to use them. You don't just
He
take a
he
loaded gun
probably
and
thought
run
he
around
knew
in
how
the
to
woods.
use
No,
it.
you just don't. That's just dumb. And any person who owns guns talks to their children about guns so that they don't accidentally do something really stupid with the gun.
Any person who owns guns should talk to their kids about gun safety so their kids don't do anything stupid. I don't think it happens in every case, unfortunately.
I would think that a colonizer would be smart enough to know that, though. I mean, he's a colonizer. In fact, I'm just surprised that
I
all the
mean,
kids don't know how to use firearms, but
you, I would think they don't generally use guns in their day-to-day colony life, so it's not really required most
you
of the
gotta shoot the
time.
varmints, man.
Well, that's true, but like most of their guns are wireless, right? So they would have had to throw them out. I mean, how many people had old handguns? Like the CDF guns, they wouldn't have been able to use those if they had them because they have to link to a brain pal, right?
Maybe? I don't know.
Yes, because they had to go completely dark.
But, Hickory and Dickory can still record.
Yeah, but they're not transmitting. They're just recording. That's, you know, and that's open technology, not human technology.
Hmm,
Because they didn't transmit any of their recordings out,
that's true.
right? And
And
Thoughts,
that
they
Lammy?
was
and they got anti-tech cloaks at some point.
yeah.
I did really like, Gretchen and, Zoe's hack into using their PDAs, where they're like, "We'll feed the printer for you." I thought that was very clever.
Yeah, offering to help. I'm amazed that they're the first people to think of that.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. That's All right,
All right.
I had one question for you guys, sorry.
Ooh, yes,
Lammy.
That's
please.
fine.
But like we've talked about the themes of his other books before, and I really felt like the theme of this book was belonging. Just because Zoe talks about it a bunch where she's like, what I am needs to make room, or like who I am had to make room before in my life for what I am. And now what I am has to make room for who I am in my life. And then she belongs to the Oban and Enzo belongs to her. And that's kind of like a big thing in their relationship after they get back together before he dies. What did you guys think? Did you guys agree that there's talks a lot about belonging and like what does that mean to be you versus the symbol for the Oban or what?
Red.
I would say it's about navigating identity and all the different roles that you have in your life. So kind of the same. It's also
Yeah, go ahead.
about loss, but I would say identity.
Yes, I would also go with identity over belonging because the who I am versus what I am is really like the core the core thing for Zoe, and it is Zoe's book. Like the other relationships she has are meaningful and like drive the plot forward, and like that's a lot, but the climax of the book is all about, what versus who. Identity. Yeah.
And and also there's the part where she refers to her biological parents as mother and father, and John and Jane she refers to as mom and dad.
Hmm.
And because that's how she navigates that part of her identity. It's how she still loves her parents and thinks of her as her biological parents' child, but that also she thinks of John and Jane as her parents as well.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
she just has ways of working through all these very different complex things, and she's coping with her resentment with the Oben just following her around. I mean, how annoying would that be to have them following you around, recording everything? It, it'd be terrible.
It would be pretty annoying.
Yeah. It-
All right. Have you guys seen enough gravestones in these books yet? Are you good on visiting gravestones? Or
You know,
do you
I
need more of that?
I think
no.
if we just visit 2 or 3 more, I'll be satisfied. No. It's there's a lot of gravestone visiting.
Yeah. That is something I've never understood. I mean, funerals, yes. Visiting gravestones, yeah, I don't get that. My sister every year invites me to go visit dad and mom on Memorial Day weekend. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't know.
I'm I don't know. I visit. I've got I've got in the where I am now. I've got a bunch of family, and I don't visit them often, but I do. We do occasionally. It's just nice to remember. We did it when I was a child. When I was a kid, we visited them a lot. So
Yeah. I don't know. Lammy, do you visit your dad's gravestones?
Nope.
Yeah.
Not
to
not a
against humanity.
graveyard visitor.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it. But, I mean, I know a lot of people who do, and my grandmother, when she was growing up, visited her, father's gravestone every Sunday after church. Like, that was just what they did, as they took flowers to the graveyard. It's just not my thing. So I could never see another graveyard scene ever in these books, and I would be just fine. Okay, so I have a question. Do you think we were talking about Zoe and the killing of the Oban and stuff. Do you think that assuming that they hadn't already been planning this, do you think that she was justified in her request?
Yes. The Oban have basically co-opted her childhood. Like they have taken a decade of her life and they haven't given her anything in return. So, yeah. Yeah, they owe her.
I agree that they owe her. It's tough to say they owe her that much death, but again, not really. That's on the Konsu more than her. She didn't ask them to go commit suicide. So,
And actually, compared to the last time they contacted the Consu, it really wasn't that bad because it was only 2,500 people that they lost.
yeah, versus half their whole race.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
by Grabthar's hammer. What a saving.
Oh, now I wanna go watch that movie. Um, I would say, yes, she's justified, and furthermore, that's what it's like to be a general. You you know people are gonna die, and you ha people are gonna die. You just have to try and make sure that their lives are used in the best way possible, if that makes sense. That sounds really cold-blooded, but that's why I'm not a general.
No,
I
it's
mean,
it's
it's
yeah.
space war. People gonna die.
Any war, people are gonna die.
All right, I have two last things before we get to the closing thing. So if either of you have anything else, now is the
Mm-mm.
time.
Mm, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Pretty sure. Unless something you say makes me want to say something.
All right, then what do you guys want? Like neither of you have read the fifth or sixth book, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay, what are your expectations? What are your wants? What do you need the next book to be?
Hmm.
Well, I guess I would want this next book to pick up after they've visited Earth with the Conclave and everybody. I mean, everybody's not going to get along, but maybe everybody trying to get along more and like trying to do some like maybe it'll be like co-world, uh, a co-world colonization with two races at once or something, and
And
John would
see how
have to
that
be
plays
just
out.
a colony there instead of like the leader. He'd just be a colonizer again. But that's already been done, kind of. So I don't know. That's what I would think. Something working together with another race and maybe not necessarily with the CDF and maybe even against the CDF would be my kind of prediction as to what's going to happen.
Two things, maybe three. I want to. I do want to go back to Roanoke and find out how the humans and the werewolves are getting along, but that's not necessary. That would be the lowest priority for me. I want to find out more about the anti-conclave because it's mentioned in is it the Lost Colony? It's mentioned in one of the books that the humans are trying to get together an anti-conclave or
The
something,
counter conclave, and yeah, it was
whatever.
brought up a
Yeah.
little bit in books 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Right. So I would like to see more about that, and I want them to pull Earth into the present because the Earth we talked about this during the first book. It's very clear that um the CD whatever, you know what I'm talking about. That the humans in space are keeping the humans on Earth ignorant and they aren't aware of all this technology. And so I want to see that remedied. What do you
Hmm.
want to happen, Lammy?
Um, I
Well, he
can't
knows
say
what
because I've
happens.
I
already
know.
read them.
I'm kidding. Is
I
it
don't
something
want to.
else now?
Although people who have been turned into asteroids don't care. I mean, they're not like mad about
They
it.
seem like the happiest people in any of these books.
Yeah.
That's true, they do.
I'm basically an indestroyed that just floats around and does whatever I want. And like,
Maybe the asteroids lead a revolt. That would be fun.
Like
I
if you
just looked
guys
it up.
remember the Gamaran that was hanging out outside, like in orbit around Roanoke,
Yeah,
Hmm.
he was working on his master's thesis, right?
Yeah.
yep, he was.
But yeah, they
I don't remember
those
what it was, though. What was his master's thesis?
I don't know that he even
I
said,
don't know. Yeah.
but yeah, those guys seem like by far the happiest people of any species in space.
and the most well-adjusted.
Yep.
So, first of all, I would like to say that if you're going to be in Portland, Oregon on Memorial Day weekend, the Legendarium is having a meetup there. You can find more information at legendarium.com. And now it's time for shameless plugs. Although I guess that was a shameless plug too. So, other shameless plugs.
Me, okay, I'll go. You can find me recording my podcast about fantasy books. It's Libromancy podcast. I just talk about things I like in books and sometimes things I didn't like in books I've read for 15 to 20 minutes. So,
And you can find me every week at the Cosmere Deep Dive podcast, where we talk about the Dresden Files. No, no. We talk about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere books. We are currently in Oathbringer. And we've started to do some patron-only content, which may make it to the non-patron feed eventually. I don't know yet.
Oh, I was on one of those episodes too.
Yeah, Red joined us to talk about
Alice in
um,
Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland, and
And
has promised to come back to talk about Through the Looking Glass and maybe
ooh.
Oz. And on the other
aliens.
patron-only thing, we're doing movie sequels that are better than the originals, and she wants to talk about Aliens in a few months.
Yeah, this is all. And so I actually have a shameless plug too. Starting in June, I'm gonna be releasing my new podcast called Word Less. It focuses on short stories um, in the sci-fi and fantasy genres, and the episodes are going to be about 30 to 40 minutes long a piece. So it's good literature for busy adults. So this concludes our episode. Our music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. You can find us on the Legendarium Discord. The invite link is on thelegendarium.com. We are also on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Join us in supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. Thank you, Craig, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire, and a shout out to Horizon Brave for starting it all. Thank you, Cesky and Lammy. For the Green Team, I'm Little Red Book. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. I mean, the commute's kind of long, but like, it's not a hard no for me.
Your wife might have other feelings about that.